All right. I'm really excited to join you today with Beverly Beuermann-King. Beverly and I have known each other for, I don't know, 3, 4 years now as members of the Canadian Association of Professional Speakers. She served as the president not once, but twice. And I've known her in that capacity and followed her work as a leader of resilience and living well and working well, that kind of training and thinking. She works often with teams and leaders to help their teams be more productive. She's worked in that capacity for over 20 years with a model called the SOS principle, which we might get to talk about today. Just share a little bit more. She's an author. The book is called Stress Out.
Dress out.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's right. And like me, she's a bit of a media maven with over 500 interviews, television, print, and online over the years, serving as an expert for all of the Canadian publications you would know and love. Started her business in 1995 called Work Smart, Live Smart. And there's no more time than now than we've had to figure out how to work and live in the same place at the same time with everybody working and studying from home. So I'm really thrilled to welcome you, Beverly, to the Work from Home Better interview series.
Hi there.
Great to have you. So I wanted to start a little bit by understanding from you what brought you into this work on fostering and cultivating resilience for people. How did that come to be for you?
It was really a roundabout way. I started, working with the Canadian Mental Health Association. I was brought on because I had a background in stress and managing stress and doing stress presentations. And so with them, I was really doing presentations on mental illness, everything from depression to bipolar to schizophrenia and suicide awareness. And in the midst of that, brought it all together into my business and talking about mental health. And so over the years, we've seen it really change from, stress to mental health, and now really talking about resiliency. And resiliency is so what do we do about it? We all know that we have it. And now resiliency is how do we build that resiliency? How do we manage and buffer ourselves through these kind of stressful times that we may be going through?
Yeah, and now more than ever, we need these kinds of coping skills. Just touching on that for a second, what have you noticed and observed, either working with your clients or in population in general? What are you observing now as we're in something we haven't faced in this generation? I mean, 1918, very few of us were around in 1918. What are you noticing now?
People are it's interesting because some people, it's the little things that are really starting to get to them, and other people, it's the big things, that the challenges that they're facing that are really stressing them out. And so you can't really say it's a one size fits all challenge right now. For some
Right.
people, it is having to help the kids do homework and the irritation and conflict and all the stuff that happens with that. For other people, it's not being able to see loved ones and not being able to have those hugs. For other people, that part hasn't necessarily changed for them. They were either used to doing it or it wasn't part of their experience, but it may be the things at work that are changing because there's so many more hoops that they have to jump through in order to get the work done, or the way that they connect to their colleagues, and even just simple things of asking questions and waiting for responses back. So it's really different from person to person. And I think the downfall is that sometimes we assume that our stressors are the same as other people's stressors when they may be very different.
Absolutely. I mean, I talk about micro and macro losses, and there's a vast array. And how there's probably seen over the past few years, we talk about first world problems, and I don't like it because I think that when someone's going through stress, minimizing it in the form of comparison doesn't serve anybody, because stress is stress. And I mean, I'm not going to be somebody that bungee jumps or jumps out of a helicopter or any of those things. That stresses my nervous system out incredibly. But for somebody else, it's their adrenaline rush. So you can't project on other people what should be stressful. I think that's a really important point to make.
Yeah. Even when you said minimizing it, it's not really about, we shouldn't be minimizing it, because it may be that final straw that broke the camel's back. You know, the proverbial saying that we have. It's for some people, those little things aren't on the radar. And for some people, those little things are the things that are really annoying them. And so calling them first world problems, I think what's better is to say, okay, in the grand scheme of things for you, where does this rate? Is it a little thing? Is it a big thing? Is it, you know, and getting them to put it into their perspective is probably much more helpful.
I've been noticing in my Facebook chats and in real life as well, that when people are challenged, they're very quick to go to an anger response. Like tensions seem to be a little frayed. I was walking yesterday with my love and in a park, and there was a guy, well, it was beside the park, it was a sidewalk. And there was a guy, probably 45, 50 years old, biking on the sidewalk. And I said, "Why are you on the sidewalk?" And his response, I can't repeat those words. Okay. So it's really kind of interesting what's going on out there in terms of stress. I think that anger response is a barometer for the feeling that's out there. So I want to come to some of your strategies around tied to resilience, but you've got something you call strategic hope. And I think perhaps my sense is that if we're navigating this really uncertain up and down time. I just watched the Prime Minister's news brief again this morning, and the preface to it was all of the sites in the US that are opening up and having, at the same time they're having record cases, and ICUs are under pressure in Arizona. It's like at some moment you get a feeling like, okay, we're doing the right things and there's some sense of common control. And then you get the news that there's, you know, really dire situations happening. So it's this rise. So tell me about strategic hope and how that plays into helping us at this time.
Yeah, I'm gonna step one back just a little bit. It feels like we have that great big roulette wheel, you know, that you see that you're just spinning it. It's like, where's it going to land today? You know, is it going to be technology issues? Is it going to be people issues? Is it going to be, you know, like, where is it going to land? And that's what makes it really hard. And I think that's where strategic hope comes in. Strategic hope for me, it's not whimsical. It's not, oh, I wish things were better, or, oh, you know, what I want for my birthday. Strategic hope takes work, and it has a process, and it is about it's a couple of things. It's believing that you have the skills to be able to get through this. So that's the resiliency part. It's having the skills that you've had from before that you can bring forward.
So there's a mindset. I've got what I need.
I've got what I need, or that the world is a purpose. I have a purpose in the world. I mean, that can be part of hope as well. You know, that belief that things will be okay. It's not the head in the clouds. I'm just going to, you know, think happy thoughts and happy things will happen. I think there's a real.
That's what I heard you. Yeah, what I heard you say. There's a connection to purpose and being useful.
Yeah, and action. You know, you have to do something with this. So strategic hope is also about taking some sort of action and moving yourself forward through it. So like you said, you can still be mad, and you can still be angry, and you can still stomp, scream, and shout. You can still have all of the emotions, but it's not getting stuck in the emotion. So strategic hope helps you to get through those emotions and then move into that, what's next? What am I going to do about this? How am I going to handle this? And so strategic hope, like I said, takes work. The other thing that goes with strategic hope is not just the mindset and the action, but it's also the connection. It's being able to make sure that you have the right people in your environment that are going to help support you as you move forward.
So mindset, action, and connection. So that's talking about the team and who's on your team. That extends to your work environment and extends beyond that now as well, as it does always, but into who's going to support you personally as well.
Yeah, for me, the people are who fans the flames, right? So I look at hope as being kind of that spark, and that spark needs energy. So it needs energy from us. So we need to make sure that we have the right, you know, are we eating right, sleeping right, exercising? Are we doing the things that are going to give us energy? But I see the connections that we have are the ones that are fanning that flame to get that fire to burn, so that we can kind of hold on to that hope.
That's powerful, because Yeah, and I have a different model for productivity and what we need, and connection is part of it as well. But I love that analogy of fanning the flames. Well, they can fan them in a dangerous way or in a supportive way, depending on the quality of the connection and who's in your circle too.
So if they're throwing gas on that fire, then that's probably not a good thing, right? Like if you don't want the
Yes.
explosion, you just want that light to grow. You want it to kind of burn and be able to move you forward, right?
And that's an important point too, because I've seen more unfriending on Facebook in particular than I have in a long time. And people have been guarded politically to talk about things for some time now, but it's extended. I've never seen so much, I think, conviction to living values and putting their actions and saying, these are my values, and it's not okay to be in my circle if you are not aligned with these values. So I think there's a tightening of the circles, if you will. Hopefully, we still keep open and listening. There was a radio segment yesterday, I think I heard on CBC, where they were talking about the friendship between a Black man and a former KKK wizard, like the top guy, and how over years they they had a respect for each other, to listen to each other, and eventually the KKK member left the KKK and gave his wizard robes to the Black man. So the evolution that can come from an openness, but I can imagine there's a lot of periods of time where if you're not in a healthy way open to that dialogue, that it could be really detrimental.
Yeah, I think, part of strategic hope is about reaching out, right? It's about shining a light, not just for yourself, but shining that light for other people. And so it is filled with compassion. It is filled with kindness. It is allowing people to make mistakes and helping them to grow through those mistakes. I think that's all part of strategic hope. And we give that sometimes we're better at giving that to other people than we are to ourselves. So I think also, that we need to be really kind to ourselves, that we're not going to have all of the answers. We're not going to say the right things. We're going to make mistakes, and that's okay. Strategic hope allows you to be able to keep moving forward. It allows you to see that it's not about the short journey, it's about the long journey.
It's about the long journey and not getting stuck, right? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So hope is an acronym, right?
Yeah, hope stands for me. I use hope to kind of the acronym hold on, possibility exists. So even if it's chaotic right now, that doesn't mean that it's going to be an hour from now, 2 days from now, 2 months from now, or 2 years from now. So it's that kind of, what's the possibility? What's the next action? What's the thing that I can do? And sometimes the thing that I can do, the only thing I can do, is to reach out to my connections. So it's to reach out to a girlfriend. It's to reach out to my husband. It's to, to vent. It's to go outside with my puppy dogs. It's just that connection to something, to say, okay, I just need to wait this out, and I'll be able to figure it out. It's again, not whimsical. There still has to be action. I'm not just going to sit there and wait for the world to change around me, but I am going to wait and see what else I need to do because of what's happening in the world.
So it made me think of a memory of the one time I felt like I was entering into panic attack territory, and that was very new for me. But I think I've heard enough about it that I'm like, wait a minute, this feeling of I need someone else to help me navigate through this. And I remember being very upset and just I went to my phone and I put 6 people in a Facebook group, and I'm like, somebody call me. I couldn't think beyond that. I needed that connection to have some of my really level-headed, wonderful friends be that sounding board that can help me get a different perspective in that moment, because I wasn't able to go right to it myself. So yeah, knowing what you need, perhaps is that some pre-work that someone could do so that they know what their go-to is in that moment of overwhelm.
Yeah, I think what are the kinds of things that send you into a spin of any kind? So whether that's a panic spin, whether that's the blues. So for me, I tend to go more into the blues side of things when I'm feeling overwhelmed, where I get stuck. And so part of it is recognizing what that feels like for you, and then what's the next step? What do you need to do? And so for me, sometimes it's venting, sometimes it's napping. Sometimes it's just, it's doing something creative. Putting, whether it's going on Canva or whether it's, playing on something, but knowing what your reactions are can then help you to figure out what kinds of strategies you can put together for it.
Mm. So when you're working, I'm thinking now back to work with leaders and teams, what do you say to help people in that environment navigate through when they're noticing somebody else is struggling or a leader is sensing the team is not gelling? Do you have any thoughts to share around hope and sort of resiliency in that construct?
I have what I call the 10 essentials that employees need from their work life, or from their and from work or from their job. And the last one is hope. And as leaders, it's the leader's job to be that beacon of hope. And so that seems like a pretty big thing to put on a leader's shoulders, but it might be just as simple as saying, I don't know what tomorrow is going to bring, but this is the next step. This is all I need you to do right now. And so hope can be just helping to clarify what that path looks like. What is the next thing, or what is the objective, or what is it that we can do? And so as a leader, helping people to figure out what is it that they can control, what is it that they can't control. Let's spend our energy on the things that we can control. What is it that we can do right now? I don't know what we can do, with the rest of the project, but I know what we can do right now. What's the next step? Right. And so as a leader, that's one of the biggest things that you can do, is to provide that kind of hope, the connection piece, the supportive piece, and what's the action?
So what does a leader do when they're having that, and they're going to, because we're all going through this cycle of up and down? What does a leader do in a moment where they're feeling a little down, yet they're still in the role where they're expected to lead?
So I think it's modeling good behavior, modeling healthy behavior. And so I go back to the basics. We talked earlier about the SOS principle. SOS stands for situation, ourself, and support. And so
say that one more time.
So situation. So the first S is situation. The O is for ourself. Right. And then the last S is support. Okay. So what are you going to do about it? How are you going to take care of yourself? And who's there to support you? So as a leader, when you start to feel overwhelmed, it's by asking those three questions. What am I going to do about this? How am I going to take care of myself? And who's there to support me? And I think sometimes we forget as a leader that we have to have our own support circle. And so that may be the people on our team. It may be our colleagues who are at the same level, or it may be, like you said, good friends or mentors outside of our business that we can go back to and rely on.
It's the same as parents and leadership and family. It's the same thing, right? We need supports that are not necessarily the kids. It's going to be a peer network and outside experts potentially that we're going to for support and learning and new perspectives as well. Yeah. What are you noticing now in terms of your corporate population and some of the struggles or challenges that they're going through now? Whether resilience ties to it or not, what are you noticing that leaders need to bring to the table differently?
Understanding and insight. And so understanding that people are different and they're at different stages and they're going to have different reactions, and insight as to why they're having the reactions that they're having. I think, we talk about the change process, and most people think that the initial part of the change is the hardest part. But it's, we talk about being anger and, denial and all of those things. That's not the hardest part of the change. And I think what we're in right now is actually the hardest part of that change. It's that transition, the transition between the old and the new. And, letting go of the way that we used to do things, but we can't quite step into the future because we don't have all of the answers yet. We're not quite there yet. And so this is the shaky ground piece, right? Like, nobody knows.
I sense it. Yeah, I was going to say, I sense it now because the media is dying to talk about the second wave. We're not through the first wave. Yeah, we're so not through the first wave. We've slowed down the wave. The second wave is months away. So there's a sort of, is there a rush to feel something different so that we know what we're dealing with? I mean, this extended uncertainty is for everyone is a great leveler, but it makes us all squirm from time to time. And I think leaders are in a really challenging position, being asked to be the person who's showing the way forward, whether it be, like you said, this is what we're going to do tomorrow morning. That's as far as I can see now. Uh, and, uh, and that's just an extremely challenging place to be for parents, for leaders, for anyone that's guiding other minds.
It's a tough place, and we're jumping ahead too quickly because we're trying to
Hmm.
get to that new normal, but we're
Yeah.
not there yet.
Yeah.
And so it is about just responding on a day-to-day basis. And as a leader,
Yeah.
it's just helping people to feel as comfortable and as safe as they can feel right now,
Yeah.
and letting them know that they've already overcome all of this stuff behind them, right? And so that
Yeah.
whatever comes ahead, they've got the skills, they've got the
Yeah.
team, they've got the connection, they've got the smarts, they've got the resources, whatever it is, but they've already overcome so that they can continue whatever's thrown in front of them, and they will do
Yeah.
that together. And I think
Yeah.
as a leader, that bonding, bringing people together as a team, is going to help them to be able to take those next steps.
So I want to just dig into that a little bit, because I'm sure you have some wisdom to share on this now that everybody's virtually bonding. How is that portraying differently now? And what's the opportunity for people that are like, I can't bond over this Zoom. It's not the same as just walking by and seeing somebody. Do you have any thoughts on that to share?
It's funny because it's not the same, but for some people, they're loving it because they're having so many more conversations.
Hmm.
And if it's done right, you can still have great conversation. I can't touch you, but we can still have, so I have friends who are in BC,
Hmm.
and, we've had more conversations than we did when we waited to get together in person. So it is an interesting thing. What I'm seeing in teams is that, the skill level
Mm.
being upped, right? And how we're communicating. So it used to be, at the beginning of this, it was, people were having team meetings, a couple times a day.
Yeah.
And then, now we're having them, maybe once a day, maybe a couple times a week.
Hmm.
And now we're starting to get into the routine of, okay, so how often do we need to check in with each other?
Hmm.
What works for our team? And for some, they need, especially if you're frontline, healthcare, it may be much more often, but for other teams, they're going back into a regular kind of schedule. And so I think it's make the most of it. At the beginning, people were afraid to have their cameras on. Oh, my hair's not right, or my background's not right, or you'll see the kids behind. And now, people are much more comfortable.
Hmm.
And it doesn't, because people were going, okay, well, it has to look professional. No, that's not the purpose of communication. Communication is to get rid of the uncertainty. The uncertainty is the uncertainty between what's the process, and also the
Hmm.
uncertainty of how are we doing? How are we connecting? Are we okay? Is the team okay?
Hmm. And I would say, just as far as backgrounds go, the most important thing is that there are not distractions impeding your message.
Yeah.
So professional is it doesn't have to look and feel a certain way, but it has to be something that's not going to be a barrier to your message.
No, but you know what? If it is too, because I have, I've been working with some smaller teams, and that there's one, who, she regularly has her child sitting on her knee because she's in caregiving mode too. So if you want me to be productive at work, you're going to have to realize I have
Yeah.
3 or 4 things going on at the same time.
Yeah.
So if you want my full attention, I can't give you 100%, but I'm paying attention while I'm doing this other part too, right? And you've got to be okay with that. So I think we can let go of some of that presentation that you and I do may be very different than a team meeting of 5 or 6 people, right?
Yeah, I was thinking poor sound quality. I was thinking poor lighting, some of those things where you have an ability to control it. Yeah, if there are two cats that run back here now, I'm not really worried about it. And I think, yeah, I mean, I was meeting with my investment advisor earlier this week, and two of her kids came in with homework questions. And that, but that's not that's perhaps interrupting the message, but that's not impeding her ability when we're back looking at each other to then connect and make sure that presence is there, because that's going to be required. Now, there's an interesting thing that's happening as well with a fatigue around video, because it's not this is it's not normal that I would see a picture of myself below you when I'm talking to you. Number one, that's weird. And number two, I'm looking at the camera, not looking at your face right now, because when you're broadcasting and connecting to the viewer that's out there, you're communicating in a different way again there. So to give connection and presence requires looking at the camera. To receive all the complex signals means I'm looking down here to receive everything from you. So it's a bit fractured, the whole video experience itself. But I like what you said, make the most of it, because it's still a very, very, very rich medium of communication.
Yeah, and so my number one tip is make sure the camera's on. Like if we're going to do it this way, yeah, put the camera on. We have been conditioned from the moment that we're born to look into somebody's eyes.
Mm-hmm.
And so you'll notice I spend more time, and I know it's probably not great. I don't spend my time looking at my camera. I try to have my camera positioned where I can, but I'm looking into your eyes. I want to be able to see that. And so, because that's what warms my heart, that's what fills me up. And so if you're feeling fatigued, look for the strategies that are going to help. Have those side conversations, use the chat, make fun, not make fun of each other, but make it fun, Yeah. Work should be fun. So we've had a lot of seriousness. A leader's role right now is to figure out how many different ways you can inject humor and fun and interaction and enjoyment, engagement into the day-to-day stuff.
Yeah, my kids tell me their dad is actually using a virtual background. He loves hockey, so he's using different hockey arenas. And last time he was in his full mask. So there's all kinds of ways to bring. What I love is there's no better time to look at everyone as fully human. We talked a long time now for a few years about bringing your whole self to work. Well, work's landed in our living rooms, right? So now that we cannot fail to see everyone in their full humanity. But I know not every leader does. Not every leader. A lot of leaders are very task focused and just one thing after the other. And there isn't this connection that from a personality type. There is a difficulty in empathy and in compassion. What do you say to those leaders who have an opportunity to stand in a place of growth around a depth of connection that they can cultivate here? But it's not their natural thing, but it's, in my view, it's required now. What's your perspective on that?
I think as leaders, we all have different strengths. And if connecting is not one of them, this is a perfect time to really work on that, to try to figure out how to make those connections, to be in the moment when you're having those conversations. I think I'm going to kind of tie this back into resiliency, but we are going to be seeing what we call an echo pandemic, where in if tradition is kind of true to form, 12 months from now, 18 months from now, we're going to be seeing the ripple out effect of all of this mental health stuff, the high stress, the isolation, the disconnection, the fear of even being in the same room with other people. So for people who are at risk, there is going to be mental health challenges over the next, 6 months to 18 months. And as a leader, being in tune to that, being in tune to the people that, and having those conversations and being in tune to when things are different. So if you've never had those conversations, you can't be in tune to somebody to see if they are struggling.
So is there a practice that you're inviting a practice in, like, get used to having these conversations? One of the things I've come to, and I talk to leaders a lot about, is the one question I want them to ask their employees is, what do you need to succeed? And it's a non-invasive question. So it's not, it's respecting privacy and health and all of those things, which are personal, but it's asking what do you need to perform at your best? And I think now, we're moving from a suck it up and show up culture to one that it's better off for everybody else. And it's a kindness and a societal respect for you to stay home if you're compromised. Now that compromise could be with this coughing and sniffles that everyone will give you side eye if you're out in public now, or it could be an invisible challenge, compromisation, all of these things which are hidden, which have been hidden and really, really, really been hard in our culture for anyone to bring up without fear of repercussion. And so I'm interested in what happens from a leadership perspective to be in practice with this kind of what do you need to succeed, so that you can invite the best performance from the widest cross section of people at your table. It's not a time to lose people by a non-intended pressure that will force people to leave, which is what's happened for years and years and years.
And I would add one more word to that statement. I'd say, what do you need in order to succeed right now? Like, what do you need now in order to, because it's going to change, right? And, depending
Absolutely,
on my level of overwhelm, my level of frustration.
Yeah.
And so right now I might need you just to listen, or right now I need better equipment. I go up and down with this, my internet and technology. It's like, and so some things I have answers to, some things I won't have answers to. In the same in a leadership role, right? Some things you'll be able to do, some things you may not be able to do. But even the fact of asking the question and listening, gives people that sense of control and being heard.
Yeah, and asking the question and listening when you're not used to it can be a little bit uncomfortable. And it also requires a bit of patience. And if there's one word that I think COVID is bringing to everybody's life that they need more of, it's patience. Everything we do is going to take more time, potentially more energy, definitely more space. All our resources are going to be drawn on much more than they were before. And to have the mindset that, okay, when I go grocery shopping now, there's likely going to be a lineup. And I won't be able to just run in and pick something up. It reminds me of when I moved to Tokyo, lived there for 3 years. You could get 1 or 2 things done in a day, not like that. I'm going to run 6 errands here and just knock off a bunch of things. It just wasn't possible. So there's a reset around patience. And I wonder what your thinking is around that. And as particularly around leadership and workloads, when it's a leader's job to clarify, what do we need to focus on and where are we going, but also to, I think, manage the workload so that the team can sustain their performance. Do you have any comment on that?
Yeah, I think the workload is a two-way conversation, right? It's not a one way. So yeah, we have these things that we need to get done. And as a leader, you may be, having the vision on how that moves forward. But as a team member, you also have to say, that's great, I see it, but there's no way we can get 5 things done today. We can only get, like you said, 3 things done today. Which the 3 are the most important? I'll try to do 5, but I can only get for sure 3. So having those kinds of conversations. So as a leader, allowing your team to speak up, to feel heard, to be able to speak up in a way that they don't, by them saying no, or I can't, or I don't understand, that they're not going to feel like there's going to be repercussions from that. So it's a sense of being free from hostility, a sense of being free to speak your mind, but then being open then when it comes back at you to have another conversation to say, okay, well, I get that. Okay, so let's figure out how this is going to get done together so that it's more collaborative.
It's going to take more time. Those conversations are going to take more time, and that spirit and openness to listen is going to take a lot of practice if you haven't been traditionally doing it. The number of people I've coached over the years who are in a position where they're ready to leave their jobs because of overwhelm, and they haven't been able to have the conversation with peace of mind, and they're ready to quit. I'm like, what have you got to lose now? Right? If you're ready to go, is now the time that you can have the conversation? And even then, it can be perceived to be too difficult to have. So there's a real opportunity, I think, in creating, like, as you said, that safe, trusted place. How can leaders role model that? What can leaders do to help their team feel like this is something that they're open to hearing?
Again, I go back to the role modeling of talking about when you're challenged. So, if it was me, I would say, okay, so when I get frustrated, I tend to stomp, scream, and shout. It's not at anybody. If I don't get rid of the emotional energy, I can't think. I can't do the next step. And so that's going to be me. If that is frightening or scary, let's talk about that. I'll try to, do it away from that.
Well, yeah, because there's a huge thing in a responsibility in whenever you're having an expression like that, you're passing what I call the stress hot potato.
Yeah.
And that is especially on sensitive people, of which I'm one, or anybody empathetic in the crowd, or anybody that's triggered by this. that can be a very unkind thing to do, but very also hard to avoid in a moment of stress. So I would say there's a real learning opportunity if that's your go-to, to find another way to invite pause and invite an opportunity so you can do that without sharing that stress with that's really important now, because your expression could send somebody else over the edge.
Yeah. So one of the things that I talk about with leaders is really about knowing each person on your team, knowing how they respond to stress. So what are their sources of stress, but also how do they respond? Do they stomp, scream, and shout? Do they get really quiet? So if I stomp, scream, and shout, but there's somebody on my team who gets very quiet, I might think that they're not stressed because they're not doing what I would typically think of somebody as being stressed out. So I have to be more aware of what each person does. Somebody else they may end up with more headaches, or somebody else may end up, running to the bathroom more often because it's more gastrointestinal. You have to know each person. And I'm not talking about, the dirty details of their life, but you have to know them well enough to know, is it the big things or the little things that really get to them? What's their typical response? Because if I know the typical response, then I can tell when they're not being typical. So somebody is, so then I need to be aware of asking the right questions to say, is everything okay? What can I do to help? What can I do to support you right now? And it's
the same way with parents and teens. All of a sudden somebody's quiet and withdrawing. There's a clue that something's, whenever you notice something shift.
That's right. It's the shift out of the normal. And they've said, no, I'm always like this when I'm trying to figure it out. I'm talking to myself, or I'm, moving things around. That's just me. Okay, that's great. I got it. When they're not like that and they're not being expressive, then that's maybe when I need to worry about that particular person.
Yeah, people worry about me if I'm quiet. I get that. I was like, wait, was something wrong? You're not saying anything.
And so I think for leaders, it's being aware of who's on your team, how do they normally respond, but also letting them know too how you typically respond. Because you have to, like, I go back to what we were talking about, was modeling. Even as parents, if you don't talk about the things that are stressful. So I'll use the example of a parent. If a parent never talks about being stressed, or and they always talk about things being okay. If a child is now stressed and things are not okay, well, I can't tell them that because they wouldn't understand, right? I want to talk to somebody who's going to understand so it's modeling the fact that it happens, and also talking about the strategies that you use. And when I feel like that, I find that this is really helpful for me. I don't know what you guys do, but this is what I do. And that seems to get me through it. And so we talk about strategy. We talk about how we are resilient. We talk about the ways that we get through. And that's what leaders need to be able to have conversations around.
Yeah. And what percentage of leaders do you think bring a conversation about handling stress into the regular way they work?
I don't know what the percentage would be. I would say leaders who are strong leaders, and people who and people want to follow them naturally, are really good at having those conversations. And so it is a skill. It is a strategy. We used to call it the soft skills. Yeah. But those are really, I think, the core skills for a leader. You can learn the technology. You can learn whatever else, but you have to really work at the people side of it.
Well, what's coming to mind is now looking at the variety of political leaders we're able to witness now in leadership roles, and they're not having two-way conversations with us. They're having a one-way monologue. But what's said in that monologue also has a powerful impact on how the community views what's going on, and whether it's pouring gasoline on a fire or whether it's actually being empathetic, like Bonnie Henry out of BC. Her empathy was off the charts at the beginning, and you find people, and BC's done an incredible job of managing and respecting each other through this crisis. So it's just interesting what you model as a leader, whether you're in two-way conversation or not, what you're putting forward. And so what I think about is very senior leadership who has got an opportunity to speak to their company. There's a place for these messages and these kinds of topics in what you're doing, the how of what's going on, along with the top 3 priorities for the next month kind of thing.
Yeah, it's talking about what are the typical fears. So as a leader, what are people afraid of right now? What is it that they're uncertain about? What is it that they're feeling challenged over? I think in those addresses, the ones that have been really good from our leaders, it's when they've addressed those things.
Yeah.
And when they can say, we may not have all the answers around it, but we get that these are the things that are the questions and these are the things that we're
Yeah.
exploring.
Yeah. So then there's that connection. You feel
Mhm.
like you've been heard, even though you weren't speaking directly. Although I have to say, 2 days before the prime minister addressed a nation, I called my MP to say, why aren't we acting? This is the first time I've called my MP in my life. But I was so frustrated that we weren't, this was not a local thing to solve. This was a national, it needed national action. So I felt my stress level go down when I thought, finally, we're doing something on the scale that we need to be doing something. So yeah, I think you're right. It's acknowledging the fear and providing that road forward. And and I think when it comes to role modeling, I remember it was Easter weekend. I think there was a press briefing on Saturday at noon, and then it was Justin's going to be with Sophie and the kids on Sunday and Monday. So he's not going to be around for a couple of days. And I thought that was some fabulous role modeling, which leads to me to sort of my last or second last question. It's around role modeling as we see people work from home. There are some reports that say people are working more hours. There are some people that say we're working less. There is a tendency to blur the boundary between work responsibilities and our personal responsibilities. And as leaders, we always have a place to play, a role to play in that. And I give you the example of our prime minister who was displaying that. What are you sensing leadership responsibility is for sending emails out, for being on Slack, for being accessible and also helping their team to preserve those very necessary boundaries?
uh, Prior to all of this kind of blowing up, one of the companies that I really liked had a email policy that at 5:30 they turned their email servers off.
Mhm.
So you could compose, but you could not send. And I thought that, they wanted the message of work is, do your work at work, but when you go home, you've got family responsibilities. We want
Mhm.
you taking care of yourself. Your mental health and your connections are really important. And I think we still
Mhm.
need to see those kinds of things happening. So modeling that kind of behavior, unless it is something dire, you shouldn't be sending it after work hours. It
Mhm.
should, I mean, you can compose it if you have to get it off your mind. And I've had that too, where I've got this thing and I just can't let it go and I won't be able to sleep if I don't write it down. Great, compose it, but don't send it. You can put it on, to send at 8 o'clock in the morning or 7 o'clock in the morning. I think we
Or
need to,
9 o'clock in the morning.
whenever, right? Like, I think
Right.
we need to get back to having a bit more control of what the work time frames are. I'm as guilty as anybody. My work-life balance went completely out the door over the last 3 months. I'm starting to get better at it now, where I'm figuring out what my routine is going to look like, because I lost a bunch of stuff. I lost my I'm a karate sensei, so I lost
Yeah.
my teaching, right? So I was teaching 2 nights a week and that went away, and I was doing a couple of other things and that went away, and then but I didn't replace it. I just left it and I filled it with work time. And then I was realizing how much time I was spending. So I think that's where a lot of people are at right now. Over the last month, I've seen where people are now starting to focus in on taking care of themselves, bringing joy back into their life, bringing their hobbies back in modified form, whatever that might be, but having fun, because this is what life could be like for a while. And, we buckled down, but now we have to get back to taking care of ourselves.
Yeah, I think it's wildly different because there are people whose jobs stopped immediately, and there are people whose businesses have taken off and they can't keep up with orders, and or they've been struggling to just keep the business afloat. There are such a wild number of realities out there, and I think it's important. I always say practice extreme self-care all the time, because and now more than ever, because of the emotional charge around everything that's happening around us, we don't know when a micro loss or a macro loss is going to trigger us again. And so we need that well rested, energized body and mind so that we can not the time to shortchange your sleep, and your immune system will suffer and leave you open. It's not the time to stop your movement and to eat poorly. It's really an act of self-love to stay in that place of extreme self-care. So leaders can role model that too. And so, when you look at leadership, I've always looked for people that are honoring their body, mind, and spirit, as well as much as they're honoring their purpose, so that by that, they can keep serving. I think that's super powerful. So, Beverly, this has been a really rich conversation where we've touched on work, how you are in work. We've touched on resilience. We've touched on stress management. We've talked about parenting. If there's one thing that you would like people to take away now as we navigate the next period of reality, what would you invite people to think about now as they go forward?
Probably, I'd have to go back to what we originally started with, which was around hope. And Desmond Tutu says, hope is being able to see the light despite the darkness. So it's being able to move forward through all of this without having all of the answers. And I think whether you're a leader, whether you're a parent, or whether you're managing yourself, it's just being able to take care of yourself, take the next step, and make sure that you have those supports around you.
Wonderful, wonderful advice. I love it. Thank you so much for sharing all that insight with us. I'm just going to glance over on my other screen here because I can see some comments have come through Facebook, and I want to make sure there's not a question. I'm seeing hello from several people in our CAPS community. Hello, everybody out there. I know there's a lag. So yes, you've got a Lori says, I love the HOPE acronym. Yeah, it's very powerful. Yeah, so there's no questions there, so I feel okay to leave that. And just end with a big thank you for sharing this message. I want people to know they can find you and connect with you at worksmartlivesmart.com. So that's Beverly Beuermann-King, resilience and stress expert, and worksmartlivesmart.com is where you can find her. So thank you everyone as well for joining me, and I hope you'll tune in. There are more videos at my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Clare Kumar, and you can get some guidance on how to work from home better from a course I created just for you, which you can find on my website, clarekumar.com. All right, thanks everyone. I wish you a successful and fulfilling rest of your day.